Hi, glory builders. Have you ever stared at the ceiling late at night, heart pounding, dreams too loud to ignore, and asked yourself, what am I really made of? Not what others say, not what society stamps on your forehead, but deep, raw under your skin kind of strength. The kind that bleeds, breaks, rebuilds, and burns again. That question, what am I really made of, is the starting line of every person who ever chased greatness and caught it. All right, warriors, let's begin this story. Part 1. What are you really made of? Let me introduce you to a boy named Zan. No, he wasn't a prodigy. There were no medals above his bed, no headlines praising his name, and certainly no crowds waiting to cheer him on. Just a cracked mirror that reflected more hunger than hope, a floor mattress that smelled of years of poverty, and the soft, monotonous hum of a broken ceiling fan that sang lullabies of struggle through the humid nights. The room was small, barely wide enough to stretch his arms. But in Zayn's mind, it was a coliseum where dreams were born and battles were rehearsed. He didn't grow up in glory. He grew up in grit. He came from the underbelly of a forgotten city. A city where sirens sang more often than birds, where ambition was mocked, and where dreams were treated like graffiti, unwanted, sprayed across crumbling walls, and easily wiped away by time, by doubt, by the weight of survival. In that world, hope was fragile. It wasn't handed to you. It was something you fought to keep alive, breath by breath. But Zayn's dream? It wasn't fragile. It wasn't quiet. It didn't whisper through the walls of his small room. It roared. It beat like a second heart in his chest. While other kids dreamed of comfort, of food on the table, of escaping the streets, Zayn dreamed of becoming a world champion in boxing. A wild thought, maybe, a foolish one, according to many. But to him, it was a calling. It sounds glamorous, doesn't it? Ringside crowds chanting your name, belts glimmering under bright lights, flashing cameras, sponsors knocking at your door. But that's just the highlight reel, the final product, the polished glass. Here's what they don't show you in the documentaries. Greatness is ugly. It's bloody. It's bruised. It's lonely nights and aching bones. It's rejection that slaps harder than any opponent. Greatness doesn't knock gently. It barges in. It screams in your face. It demands your identity. It breaks you down to see what you're really made of, then dares you to build yourself back with nothing but will. And Zayn? He started with nothing. Not even proper gloves. His hands bore the scars of cheap leather, torn up mitts he bought from a flea market with change he had saved from running errands. They had more holes than padding. The seams rubbed raw against his knuckles until his skin peeled and bled. His punching bag? Not some expensive equipment. Just old rice sacks, filled with a mix of sand, torn clothes, gravel, and even newspapers. He hung them with rope tied to rusted hooks in a garage that barely stood upright. Sometimes the sack tore mid-punch and sand scattered all over. But that didn't matter. He patched it up, tied it again, and kept swinging. The gym? If you could even call it that. It was a rusted shed tucked behind a scrapyard. No lights, no fans, no mirrors, just concrete walls stained with sweat and a floor that cracked under every step. The only music that played was the sound of fists hitting bags and lungs gasping for air. The stench of oil, blood, and old rubber lingered permanently. Yet that shed was sacred. It didn't offer comfort, it offered truth. While others trained to impress, Zayn trained to survive. There was no coach, no strategy, no audience. Just instinct, discipline, and raw desire. The kind that burns even when no one's watching. The kind that keeps you up when the rest of the world is asleep. The kind that doesn't ask, will I make it, but instead says, I have to. Champions aren't made in rings. They're built in silence. Punch after punch. Failure after failure. Breath after breath. People around him didn't get it. Why spend hours punching a sack? Why run until your legs give out? Why sacrifice meals just to buy tape for your wrists? His answer was always the same. Because I know who I want to become. He never complained. Not when his fingers froze during early morning runs. Not when his shirt clung to his back with sweat under the scorching sun. Not when blisters on his feet made it painful to stand. Because every drop of discomfort brought him one step closer. Discomfort is the down payment of greatness. If you avoid pain, you avoid your potential. Zayn wasn't chasing claps. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing a version of himself that didn't yet exist, but had to. So yes, no medals above his bed. Just ceiling cracks and old dreams taped to the wall. But those cracks let in the light. And that light, however dim, was enough to keep him swinging. Kids pointed. Some laughed. Coaches overlooked him like background noise. Strangers scoffed. You? A champ? You can barely keep your chin up. But Zayn didn't blink, because something inside him was louder than the noise outside. There was a storm in his soul, a voice that hissed through his ribs. Keep going. Prove them wrong. He trained when others slept, shadowboxed in alleyways, ran barefoot on broken pavements. He didn't post about it. He didn't flex for followers. He just did the work. Every single day. The strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. That gym, no, that sanctuary became his second home. Not because it welcomed him, but because it tested him. Every drop of sweat was a silent scream. I am not done yet. Every bruise was a badge. Every blister a step forward. He wasn't just fighting opponents. He was battling things most people run from: poverty, self-doubt, rejection, and the ever-chilling shadow of not being enough. He was never handed a plan. He wrote his own, painfully, slowly, day by day. One evening, after a brutal training session where he collapsed face first on the floor, his trainer leaned over and said, "You okay, kid?" Zayn, with blood on his lips and fire in his eyes, whispered, "Pain reminds me I'm still in the fight. The pain you feel today is the strength you'll use tomorrow." It wasn't about applause. It wasn't about being seen. It was about not quitting when no one was watching. Zayn showed up every day, not for the world to clap, but for his soul to breathe. He began entering local street-level bouts. No cameras, no commentary, just bare lights, cheap gloves, and eyes hungry to see someone fall. He fought with a rage that didn't seek revenge, it sought redemption. People started noticing, not because he was winning, but because he never stopped trying. The ones who stay standing after the storm are the ones the world remembers. Zayn wasn't winning every fight, but he was growing with each loss. He studied every punch he took, not with shame, but with strategy. Where did I drop my guard? How can I fix this? Every mistake was fuel. Every defeat, a whisper that said, "You're not done yet." And slowly, bit by bit, people began to say his name. Not mockingly, but with curiosity. That kid, what's driving him? And the truth? It wasn't a title. It wasn't even money. It was honor. It was the fire to rise from the kind of life where even hope comes with a price tag. Because at the end of the day, Zayn didn't want easy. He wanted earned. You don't climb mountains for the world to see you. You climb so you can see the world. So, let me ask you again, what are you really made of? Are you just daydreams and wishful thinking? Or do you have the grit to break, bleed, and keep swinging? This is only the beginning of Zayn's journey. The bruises are fresh. The world still doubts him. But something is shifting. And greatness? It's watching from a distance, smiling, waiting to see if he's really ready. The gloves are on. The bell hasn't even rung. Let the real fight begin. Part 2. When the world says no. There came a day that felt like a spotlight finally turned toward Zayn. After years of punching shadows, he got his moment, a ticket into the regional qualifiers. This wasn't just a match. It was a door. One solid win, and he would step into the National League, a stage he had visualized 1,000 times from the floor of his broken gym. He trained like a man possessed. He didn't just punch the bag, he punished it. He ran till his feet blistered. He hit walls. He bled. He screamed into his pillow when his body gave out. He missed meals, skipped sleep, refused rest. He was chasing his fate like it had stolen something from him. If you want it bad enough, you'll find a way. If you don't, you'll find an excuse. And then the fight day came. The crowd was buzzing. The ring lights burned bright. Zayn stepped in, muscles tense, eyes locked. His opponent was bigger, heavier, better funded. But Zayn had something else, scars that had stories. They fought hard, round after round. Zayn landed jabs, took hits, returned fire. By the final bell, his lip was cut, ribs sore, but his heart, unshaken. The bell rang. The match was over. And then the decision. Not in his favor. A hush swept over the room. A moment of disbelief. Even the crowd murmured, confused. He hadn't been knocked out. He hadn't even been outclassed. But still he lost. Robbed, someone whispered. Zayn didn't argue. Didn't shout. He walked back to his corner, not with a bowed head, but with a jaw so tight you could hear grind. His coach reached out, trying to console him. But Zayn raised a hand. No, let me feel this. Let me remember how failure tastes. Because he knew pain wasn't his enemy. It was his mirror. It showed him who he really was when the mask of victory fell off. Loss doesn't define you. What you do after does. That night, he cried. Yes, a grown fighter. In his room, on the floor, but not out of weakness. His tears were sharp, not salty. They were forged from frustration, rage, disbelief, and a dangerous kind of love. The kind of love that doesn't let you walk away. Through those tears, something awakened. A new voice emerged inside him, calmer, clearer, deeper. Now we go harder. The very next morning, when others were still asleep, nursing hangovers or scrolling through highlights, Zayn was back. In the ring. Alone. No coach. No opponent. Just him and a heavy bag. But this time, he wasn't just a boxer. He was a warrior with unfinished business. Rejection is not the end. It is the invitation to rise again. With bleeding knuckles, he kept punching. With burning lungs, he kept running. Because he understood something most people miss. True greatness isn't born in winning moments. It's born in the shadows of defeat. That loss didn't break him. It broke open the part of him that would never beg for validation again. He didn't need the crowd. He didn't need fairness. He just needed one thing. The fight. And believe me, The next time he stepped into a ring, the world wouldn't just notice him. It would remember him. The spark was gone. Now it was a wildfire. Part 3, blood on the gloves, fire in the eyes. Years had passed. Zayn was no longer just the unknown boy punching rice sacks in a dusty shed. He had carved out a reputation, the boy who never quit. The fighter whose eyes didn't just burn with ambition, they burned with purpose. His name had become a whisper in underground circles, then a conversation, and now a promise. If that kid gets in the ring, expect a war. And then came the golden call, the national finals. This was it, the battlefield of dreams, the biggest stage he had ever stood on. His opponent? A national treasure, a polished, undefeated champion from a top-tier academy. 31 fights, 31 wins, trained in world-class facilities, sponsored, spotlighted, feared. Zayn? He came with nothing but bruised knuckles and battle scars. The night before the match, his coach sat next to him in the locker room. Silence hung between them like smoke. "You scared?" the coach finally asked. Zayn looked straight ahead, then turned to him with calm eyes. "No, I'm ready. Fear doesn't scare me anymore. Fear is not the enemy. It's the door. Walk through it." That night, Zayn didn't sleep. Not from anxiety. He had fought that demon long ago. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, revisiting every moment that led to this one. The sandbags, the sweat-soaked floors, the losses, the laughter, the pain. This wasn't just a fight. It was a final exam written in blood. The next day, the stadium was packed. Cameras clicked. Commentators speculated. The champion entered the ring with swagger. His gloves glistened, his footwork smooth. And then Zayn stepped in. No smile, just focus, just fire. The bell rang. Round 1. The crowd roared. But in Zayn's head, it was silent. He could hear only his breath, his heartbeat, and the thud of gloves hitting flesh. The champion came in hot. Swift, tactical, sharp. Zayn took a hit to the ribs, another to the jaw, but he didn't flinch. He adjusted. He absorbed. He evolved. Every round was a chapter. Round 2, Zayn landed a clean shot to the chin. The crowd gasped. Round 3, he ducked a brutal right hook and returned with a counterpunch that drew blood. By round 5, blood streamed down his brow. His left eye began to swell. His knees felt like jelly. The champion smirked, but Zayn smiled back. A crooked, wild warrior smile. Because at that moment, he wasn't just in the ring. He was in his element. He saw flashes of his journey. The lonely nights, the defeats, the tears. He heard voices, the doubters, the laughers, the coaches who said he wouldn't make it. When your why is strong enough, the how becomes irrelevant. Round 6, the champion came in with fury, trying to end it. Zayn danced, ducked, slipped, then boom. A body shot that made the champ grunt. And then came round 7. The stadium was on edge. The energy electric. Zayn closed his eyes for a millisecond before the bell. Whispered, "For every moment they said I couldn't." The bell rang. He moved in, not with speed, but with certainty. He faked a jab, pulled the champ into a lean, and then unleashed a left hook with everything he had: power, pain, purpose. The sound cracked through the air like thunder. The champ went down. The ref counted. 1, 2, 3. Silence. Stillness. Then the eruption. Zayn had done it. He hadn't just won a match. He had won back every no, every laugh, every doubt. He stood in the ring, battered, bleeding, smiling. Not because he proved them wrong, but because he proved himself right. Glory doesn't come to those who want it. It comes to those who bleed for it. This wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of his legacy. Part 4. The silent price of loud victories. The crowd screamed his name. Reporters chased him. Promoters dialed his number around the clock. Zayn, the underdog turned national champion, had become a sensation overnight. Billboards carried his image. Interviews flooded his schedule, and for the first time in his life, the world applauded him without hesitation. But applause doesn't heal wounds. With the glory came a new kind of pain, quiet, invisible, and suffocating. Every night after the spotlight dimmed, he found himself alone in cold hotel rooms. No family, no lifelong friends, just the sound of his own breath and the throb of his swollen fists. His fingers twitched, his ribs ached. The bruises on his body were obvious, but it was the ones on his soul that hurt more. Fame lights the stage, but shadows the soul. After one of his toughest fights, he limped back to the gym, not to train, but to feel. The building was empty. The old rice sack punching bag still hung there like a silent reminder of his past. He sat on the floor, championship belt across his lap, sweat still glistening on his skin. He stared at the belt, not with joy, but with reflection. They see the win, but they don't see the war, he whispered. He remembered every cut, every missed family celebration, the birthdays he couldn't attend, the friends he lost along the way who couldn't understand why he was always too busy. But this was the path he chose, not because he loved pain, but because he respected the power it had to change him. Every victory is written in the ink of sacrifice. The fans saw triumph. The media printed numbers. But they never saw the cold showers at midnight. The nights where his hands were too swollen to hold a spoon. The moments before fights when his heart raced, not from fear of loss, but fear of not living up to the version of himself he had fought so hard to build. And worse, he couldn't talk about it, because the world expected strength, not vulnerability. No one wanted to hear about the pressure to win again, the pressure to be more, to never lose, to carry every hope, every dream, every underdog's belief, all on his shoulders. He began to lose sleep, not just before fights, but on regular nights. His mind wouldn't stop. Every victory replayed in his head, not as triumphs, but as benchmarks he now had to exceed. Success is addictive, and like any addiction, it demands more, even when you have nothing left to give. Once, after a press conference, Zayn skipped the victory party. Instead, he walked down a quiet alleyway and ended up at the first gym he ever trained in. The lights were off. Dust covered the floors, but it felt like home. He sat in the corner where he had once tied his worn-out shoes and whispered, "This is where I became real. Not out there in the noise. Here in the silence." He looked in the cracked mirror, the same mirror he had once used to fix his stance, to practice his confidence, to fake a smile when the world said no. And now, staring at his reflection, he didn't see a champion. He saw a boy, tired, vulnerable, but still burning with the same fire. True greatness isn't in never falling. It's in standing tall when the cheers fade. Despite the glamour of his title, there was a cost. He couldn't trust everyone around him. People came with smiles and cameras, but their eyes were on his success, not his soul. Everyone wanted something, a favor, a shout-out, a connection. No one asked, "Are you okay?" He missed the days when he was invisible, when all he had was a dream and grit. He missed authenticity. In the middle of all this chaos, Zayn began journaling. Not for the world, for himself. Late at night, he wrote letters to the kid he used to be. "You still there?" he wrote one night. "Do you remember why we started?" He reread the pages over and over. Some are stained with tears, others with blood from bandaged knuckles. But each one reminded him, you didn't come this far to lose yourself. He found peace in discipline. He rebuilt a balance. Some nights he'd train just for joy. No timer, no pressure, just him and the bag. Sometimes he'd go back to the old streets and talk to kids who were now looking up to him. He shared stories, not to brag, but to show them how real the price was. Behind every medal is a moment of doubt, a night of pain, a choice to keep going. Fame didn't define him. His silence did. His resilience did. His honesty in the dark did. He wasn't the loudest champion, but he was the realest. He wore his pain like armor, not to scare people, but to show them it was possible to carry hurt and still rise. Even when everything looked perfect on the outside, Zayn never forgot the boy who cried into his pillow after losing that first fight. He never forgot the sting of being unseen, unchosen, underestimated, because that pain built the throne he now sat on. And while others wanted the crown, few were willing to bleed for it. So he kept going, not for followers, not for sponsors, but for that boy in the mirror, the one who once dared to dream in the dark. You can lose applause, you can lose titles, but if you lose your purpose, you lose everything. And Zayn, he would never lose that. Part 5, Pass It On. The gloves are no longer laced for war, but the fire in his eyes hasn't dimmed one bit. Zayn now stands not in a ring, but beside it, holding pads, barking commands, and building futures out of broken confidence and shaky stances. He built a gym, not flashy, not commercial, but real, raw. Echoes of determination dance off the walls, and sweat paints the floors. It's not just a gym. It's a sanctuary for those brave enough to try. For kids with torn shoes, trembling voices, and hearts filled with impossible dreams. Every day, Zayn greets them with a nod, not a smile. He doesn't sugarcoat the journey. He doesn't wrap their dreams in cotton. Instead, he faces them with honesty only pain can teach. If you're not ready to give your blood, your sweat, your tears, you're not ready for greatness. These aren't just words. There is truth. Truth he paid for in bruises, stitches, and lonely nights. Now he speaks them into kids who dare to walk the path he once crawled. One evening, a boy small, nervous, barely able to look him in the eye, approached after practice. His knuckles were red, his legs wobbly. He asked, "Was it worth it? Everything you gave up?" Zayn crouched beside him, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "I didn't give up anything. I traded." He held out his hand and counted off each finger. Doubt for belief, pain for purpose, fear for resilience, loneliness for legacy, and dreams for reality. The boy blinked. Was it hard? Zayn smirked. It was hell, but so is regret. Greatness isn't found. It's forged in fire, failure, and fearless faith. You see, what makes Zayn remarkable isn't just that he climbed the mountain. It's that he came back down to lift others. He didn't just win. He transformed. And now, he's transforming others. His gym doesn't celebrate wins with confetti. It celebrates effort, dedication, sweat on the mat, blood on the tape, tears quietly wiped away in the locker room. Because he knows those are the real trophies. There's a wall in the gym, on our photos, not of champions, but of kids on day one. Kids who walked in broken, scared, unsure. And next to each photo is a handwritten note, still swinging. Success isn't measured by how far you go. It's measured by how many you bring with you. Zayn spends his mornings training fighters, his afternoons cleaning the gym, and his nights walking the same streets he came from. He doesn't forget. He refuses to, because memory is what keeps him human, what keeps him hungry. Once an interviewer asked, "You've got the money now. Why not rest? Travel? Enjoy it all?" Zayn replied, "Because the boy who trained on rice sacks still lives inside me. And he's not done." The reporter laughed, thinking it was a metaphor. It wasn't. The fire doesn't go out when you reach the top. Not if it was real. It evolves. It changes form. From hunger to humility. From ambition to action. Real legends aren't made in rings. They're made in choices. Quiet ones. Consistent ones. Some nights, when the gym is empty, Zayn stands alone, punching the bag. No cameras. No crowds. Just a man who refuses to let comfort dull his edge. He remembers his coach. The one who stood by him when everyone else walked away. The one who asked, "Are you scared?" the night before the finals. He visits his grave every year. Leaves his gloves beside the headstone. Not as a farewell, but as a thank you. Behind every fighter is someone who believed when no one else did. Zayn has become that person now. He trains orphans. He funds scholarships for kids who can't afford gear. He teaches not just boxing, but life. How to stand tall when the world wants you to crawl. How to fight with honor. How to lose with grace. And most importantly, how to get back up. He hosts an annual event called Rise Day. It's not about who wins. It's about who keeps coming back. He tells them, "I don't care if you win today. I care if you show up tomorrow." Consistency beats talent. Heart beats hype. There's one student, Lena, who reminds him of himself. Quiet, determined, wildfire beneath calm eyes. She took beating after beating in her first months. But she never stopped. One evening, she landed her first clean knockout. She cried, not because of victory, but because she finally believed she belonged. Zayn hugged her and whispered, "Now pass it on." Because that's the point, isn't it? Legacy isn't trophies gathering dust. Legacy is someone else believing in themselves because you didn't quit. Be the fire that lights someone else's darkness. Now, when people ask him what keeps him going, he says, purpose. Not fame. Not fans. Just purpose. To prove that greatness doesn't come wrapped in comfort. It comes wrapped in wounds, wrapped in sweat-drenched shirts, and nights where you cry into your hands but still show up the next morning. To show that every scar is a sentence in your story. To remind the world that the most powerful people aren't the loudest. They're the ones who keep rising. Blood, sweat, and tears aren't the cost of greatness. They're the proof of it. So now, Zayn watches, from the side of the ring, as new kids step up, scared, shaking, unsure. He doesn't tell them they'll be champions. He tells them they'll be warriors. And if they fight with heart, fall with dignity, and rise with fury, that will always be enough. You may not win every fight, but if you show up, give everything, and leave with nothing left, you've already won. Zayn's story doesn't end in a ring. It begins in every person he inspires, in every voice that whispers, "If he did it, maybe I can too." That's the real victory. And that's how legacies are built. One breathless round at a time. One broken barrier at a time. One heart at a time. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.